Hey everybody, welcome back to Some Guys Movie Reviews. Today I'm going to be talking about No Time to Die, playing some catch up on movies since my last review, so let's get started. No Time to Die stars Daniel Craig. It's his last outing as James Bond 007, and it's directed by Cary Joji Fukunaga. And I'm so glad to say that he ends on a high note. This movie is really, really fun. It has great acting, some amazing action sequences, and the cinematography is great, as well as a few surprises. So let's go into what I liked about the film and maybe some of my cons with the movie. This movie begins in the frozen wilderness, and it's our introduction to the main villain in this movie, played by Rami Malek, as well as Léa Seydoux's character when she was a little girl. And that through line is our introduction to the story in this film. And so it was really cool to see how it opened up. It was very different. It almost had a horror vibe a little bit. And it actually makes you think like, oh, like Rami Malek's going to be a really cool villain. And I'll get to that a little bit later. Then we cut to James Bond in retirement in Jamaica, and Lashana Lynch shows up, and Jeffrey Wright, and there's the CIA, MI6, and it pretty much sets up for why James Bond is back into this world, and it's a pretty good setup with some really cool character moments. One of those really awesome character moments comes from Ana de Armas. I know a lot of people have already talked about how great she was. It's a pretty short sequence, you know, it's really good. It's just pretty short, and tied to that sequence is the amazing cinematography. Linus Sandgren shot this film, and some of the sequences in this movie are just breathtaking. The blues, the turquoises, the different colors, the lighting setup, specifically in Cuba and towards the later half of the film, it just looks beautiful. He did such a phenomenal job, and I believe it's the same cinematographer of one of my favorite movies of all time, La La Land, and that movie looked gorgeous too. I think back to the Hollywood Hills dance sequence. So he really knows what he's doing. He's got a great eye, and it's definitely a highlight of this movie for me. I love the way that it looks. Hans Zimmer is here for the score of the movie, and he delivers. I think the music fits what's going on throughout the whole film, and he's just one of the best. What can we say? I mean, hearing his version of the classic, you know, James Bond theme song was just great to hear. I loved every part of that. Daniel Craig is amazing in this movie. I'm so glad that he finally got to show a little bit more of his acting range. I feel like in prior Bond films it was a little bit more reserved and quiet and, you know, reluctant hero, and that still continues a little bit, but he actually has some jokes in this film, and he honestly just feels a little bit more like a human. He feels vulnerable, and which is better for me because you're able to relate to him a little bit better, whereas in the past, if you're not like a reluctant hero who's, you know, kind of sulking all the time, then you probably didn't relate to him as much. I will say towards the middle part of this film, it does drag on a bit, and that's where the runtime maybe could have been reduced. It is a very long movie. I think it's like 2 hours, 45 minutes. And, you know, they could have tightened it up a little bit and maybe picked up the pace in the middle section. There's a lot of stuff that happens, a lot of setup for what comes in the third act. And I do think they could have reduced that to make it just a better overall experience. One of the other things I want to highlight is the action sequences, and one of them that happens towards more the beginning of the film is this car sequence. It's amazing how it's done. It begins with James Bond on like a dirt bike, and then it transitions to him, you know, in his classic Aston Martin DB5, and it's just really cool. It was shot really well, very well choreographed and staged out, and I really loved that sequence. Another amazing action sequence I wanted to highlight was maybe towards the middle half of the film. There's this car chase that goes into the forest somewhere in Europe, and it just looks really cool. It ends up being on foot, and James Bond having to take out henchmen one by one. And it also sets up the third act, the events of the third act. I really thought it was shot well, and it just felt really cool. There's this one sequence where this car like flips over. It's in the trailer, and then James Bond like turns and shoots at it. It just looks really cool. It was really well done, and I like that a lot. Then we get to the third act, and this is where we really get to see if Rami Malek's villain is good. And to me, he was okay. Probably my least favorite part of the film. It had nothing to do with him. It It had more to do with the character that was written. It just wasn't a strong character in my opinion. By the time we get to the third act, I was just like, oh, that's really what's going on. I was more invested in James Bond and his fight versus what was going on with this villain, the villain's motives and everything like that. So that's what I would say. Pretty disappointing villain in my opinion. That being said, there is an amazing action sequence that takes place on this island base in the third act. It's really cool. Again, really well shot. There's this one take in a stairwell with Bond, and it's just awesome. You get the classic like Bond shooting sequence from like the beginning of most Bond films, and it's just really cool to watch. And I had a really good time with the third act of the movie. When it's all said and done, I'm gonna give this movie a 9 out of 10. I do think it's one of Daniel Craig's best James Bond films, probably up there with Casino Royale for me. I know a lot of people say that's their favorite. Skyfall is my favorite. It's actually my favorite James Bond film of all time. Just so well done. But this one is up there, definitely better than Spectre or Quantum of Solace. So I definitely highly recommend this movie. And if you haven't seen it, check it out. I'm sure you have seen it by now because I'm getting to this review very late. But if you haven't, check it out. I think it's definitely worth a watch. Alright guys, that'll do it. Like and subscribe, comment, share. Let me know your opinion, and thanks for watching. Have a good one. Bye-bye.